All right, so let's go ahead and get into the employee's perspective of now being mobilized to work in a virtual environment from home. So Bridget, in this slide deck, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna have you kind of roll through each slide so I can see the appropriate bullets in that order. So we're working from home, and now what? Okay, so for those of you that maybe saw the first presentation, we wanted to create a little bit of levity because I think in this day and age, we need more laughs. We've been inundated with a bunch of really unique news. So again, I will self-admit, I have worked for extended periods of time in my bathrobe. I do not do video conferencing in my bathrobe. So if I ever had to do that, I would make sure to get appropriately dressed for that. That's why I recommend video, so that you force people to take that proverbial shower in the morning or get themselves ready, because it allows them to, in essence, have a break between their personal life and then starting their work day. So first and foremost, to all employees that are out there, please take a shower, brush your teeth, have breakfast. All right, so then in addition to that, as far as tips that I would suggest as it relates to making the most out of your work from home situation. So number one is that we have to accept this situation. If we try to fight this or try to not give it the care and the safety concerns that it needs, then you could really become frustrated and become unproductive in that, because you're in essence, what we had planned for and hoped to control has now changed. And so as quickly as you can accept that, the better that you can move on to being productive within your work. I would highly recommend that you establish a schedule for yourself. Routine is what you have in the morning as you go to work. Many of you, I know when I first went to virtual, I missed my morning cup of tea and listening to my favorite radio station for 10 minutes. That officially doesn't happen anymore the way that it used to. So you might want to still establish having that cup of tea, but then listening to your favorite radio station for 10 minutes in the morning, because all of them are basically available through apps and through your computer. So establish that routine. Set time boundaries for yourself. So make sure that if you want to work from 7 to 4, that you establish that work schedule and you create times for you to get out and take breaks. We are very much big proponents. We call them OOOs, or whatever the term is. Whenever I saw it the first time, I was like, what the heck is that? Feels like it's something bad. But we use out of office for Microsoft Outlook quite a bit. If someone has something going on personally, if they're focused on a particular project, because email inundation can become a significant distraction. I mentioned taking breaks. I mentioned also getting that daily to-do list. Again, for me, I have 2 to-do lists, one that is very long and has 30 to 40 to 50 items on it at one time. And then I have a daily to-do list that has 3 to 5 that make sure that I get those key aspects done on a daily basis. And then lastly is this concept of batching your work. So I recommend this because in the spirit of unitasking, which our Director of People Operations and one of our consultants has done extensive study and presentations on this, you're incredibly unproductive when you're trying to multitask. So I tried to fight that when my wife would tell me all the time, John, you cannot multitask. I didn't believe her, but through all the science and the things that I've read and seen and the input I've gotten from Christine, she's right. You cannot multitask. So if you have a particular project that needs to be done, focus your time and attention on that project. I would highly recommend that you turn off notifications on your email. If that already hasn't happened, turn off the little reminder that blurbs every single 6 seconds in the bottom right part of your computer. Those were turned off long ago for me, and I can't even stand the idea of even thinking of them. It's almost like a flashback. So yes, Bridget.
I think also, and it's important when you're taking those breaks, that you aren't just scrolling social media, whatever, on the internet. Your brain still thinks of that as work, even though you think it's fun and it's not work, but it's still reading. It's still that same kind of triggers. So really try to find something that isn't phone or internet or computer based, but something that maybe just switches what you're doing. Go for a walk, grab some water, etc.
Awesome. All right, as we continue through working from home, so we just wanted to create a little levity, right? That we think it's so important, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to provide back to the community that's given so much to me in this very unique time. So just providing some insight and sharing, hopefully some good insight and ways to think about how you can create a better work environment and culture for your employees as they go in this remote environment. So just make sure that you celebrate, you create proud moments for yourself when you have senses of accomplishment. Sometimes I give my dog a high five. Sometimes I give myself a high five. Sometimes I'll even pat myself on the back, which that may sound very odd, but when you're sitting here alone every single day and you make something good or you have a success, you want to make sure that you create that prideful moment. And you might even want to call or video conference one of your colleagues and hey, by the way, we just landed this new client, or we just finished this project successfully, or just launched this new website. So as we carry on in the presentation, so setting up your virtual office. So as it relates to setting this up, ideally, right, and I use that word very carefully, it's a quiet space with access to a window, right? So if yours is not that, obviously you can go ahead and make that more successful for yourself. So Bridget, slide through those bullets, that'd be great. So in making sure that you have quiet space with access to a window, if you don't have that, let's make sure you get that occasionally throughout their day. I've seen a few of these virtual home settings that have people set up in their basement. And I did do that the first couple of years that I owned Willery. And over time, I realized that I didn't want to go down there anymore because it became, there were no windows. And although I got a ton done, I felt very, very isolated. So as I recognized that, I actually ended up taking more time and having calls outside or near windows and whatnot to create that good sunshine spirit, so to speak. Yes, Bridget.
I have a couple places in my house that I work from, and sometimes when it's a sunny day, I tend to follow the sun. Just kind of helps keep me feeling engaged and focused.
You got it. Obviously, you want to be comfortable, right? So the temperature's got to be right. Your feet can't be cold. That's a common thing that happens in my office. So I got a space heater to help me out with that. So making sure that you're comfortable. I did actually a few months ago or a few years ago invest in a stand desk, so I can sit at my chair or also stand when needed. So that gets you that kind of get up and move around concept. Again, we've mentioned this several times. Video becomes our replacement of the socialization that we had before. Again, being able to look people in the eye, not physically, obviously being able to touch them or be in the same space for a period of time. But it gives you that forum to see facial expressions, good and bad, on them. Set boundaries. Again, I talked about this as far as no work, check my phone, can't check my phone from 6 to 9 p.m. That way I created a disconnect between my work life and my personal life, and I can devote more time and attention to my children and my wife. And then this last one is really important to me. Please do not apologize for the distractions that are happening to you. I hear it all the time. Oh, I'm so sorry, that's my dog. Or I just recently had an emergency kind of client project come up on Monday, and we were talking at 6 o'clock, and the client had a baby crying in the background. And she said, I could sense that she felt bad about it. And I was like, that makes me so happy to hear a baby cry, like not cry in a good way, just having the spirit of that little person being a part of our conversation. So distractions are there, the dogs barking at the Amazon delivery, the neighbors with the cookies, the kid next door who wants to play with your son or daughter. Let's celebrate those things and don't feel bad about them. Everybody's in this same situation, having to deal with those distractions. This part can become stressful right? It can become stressful for people. So that's why I encourage you, you don't need to apologize for it. Accept it, it is what it is, and just make the most of it. If a dog becomes incessantly crazy at barking at the Amazon delivery, just ask your colleague, can you give me a minute to settle down Fido and then get back to your work? All right. So now schools are closed, and now what? I know Bridget will also have some unique experience in this regard, having her little wonderful daughter with her throughout the day. So schedules used with timers. So like literally reminding you to like stop working or make sure to go check on your son or daughter. They're going to have a unique level of independence at this time because you're having to give them the schoolwork to do, let them do that on their own, and then check in with you occasionally. Now let's hope that they don't end up, you know, coloring your walls with Crayola crayons or spending the whole time playing Xbox games. But let's schedule that time out. Be flexible. The next point, one of my friends is actually doing this. If you're able to balance that schedule with your spouse, so they actually what they're doing is one of the spouse, the wife in this particular case, is waking up super early and getting her workday started, and then her husband will start his day a tad bit later, and then she's able to accommodate the needs of the kids in the afternoon, and he's able to accommodate the kids more in the morning, and then they have their level of independence. I know we're also under the confines of not being able to have a ton of people in our house, so just be mindful of those that are coming in.
Yeah, what my husband and I are currently doing right now, and I also expect my little one to bust through the door any moment, but we are doing blocks of time and really it's important to be communicative. He'll say, I have a phone call or a meeting at this time, and I'll say I have a webinar at this time, and just making sure we're on top of it, but also setting the expectation with our daughter that if we're on the phone, try to be quiet. And then she also knows with those timers, like we'll set a 15-minute timer and it's just her for 15 minutes, no work unless something super urgent were to come up.
Thank you. The next bullet is something that we recently have been working very hard on, is preparation for meetings during quiet time, and then your ability to condense those meetings into a shorter period of time. So as much as you can be prepared for the meetings that you have on your schedule in advance of those meetings, you can be way more condensed and concise with your communication so that you are getting more done, you're being more productive in those meetings, and we're condensing them to a shorter period of time. I saw a statistic that said within the next 5 years, and this was before the COVID outbreak, 52% of employees would be working remotely. So now I know we're at a staggeringly higher, probably higher capacity of that, or closely coming to that. And then they were talking about at least 1/3 of all meetings would be canceled, which I know many of us might be doing a dance for that, because I know meetings can become very much a drain. But as long as we're condensed and we're concise and direct, it can really help you out. Prioritizing your day's responsibilities, setting expectations with your family, like a sit down with your children and your spouse about, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. This is our new normal. Here's when mom or dad or grandma or whoever else is going to be available to support. Here's going to be your free time. These are the rules we have during your free time. I need you to check in with me, and your ability to help and support me with this is paramount, so that we can make this a success. And then lastly is, and I added this point kind of late in the game, remind yourself that this is more than likely temporary, right? Like this will not last forever. Very speculation how long we will be in this state, but it is not forever. We will figure this out. We will get through it. We will hopefully turn Corona into what is the flu, as far as a manageable, get in front of it mentality from a healthcare system perspective and our government. It's just not that right now, and we have to deal with the impact of not being prepared for something that we in essence You can debate that could have been fully prepared for weeks, months, and not even a year ago, obviously, because we didn't know about this until maybe December of last year. So anything to add, Bridget, there on schools and your experience with your daughter?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to really, in some ways, teach kids independence. I've been really proud of my daughter. Other times working from home have not been as successful. So really having that open dialogue of communication of this is what's happening is important. And then finding fun activities to kind of break up that this is kind of boring with something fun that you wouldn't have done otherwise.
All right, so then next we wanted to also be cognizant. This is something that we have to deal with consistently, but now it's even more relevant because of, again, many parents, if we do have kind of joint support of your children and whatnot, are working from home together, or maybe it's independent for a mom or a dad, and then balancing those schedules. So so in order for sharing your space, I think it's terribly important to communicate that to your children and the people that you're sharing it with. Obviously, you can't do that with your dog because they may not necessarily understand what you're about to say. But having done this for about 10 years or so, I know the mute button can be my friend, right? To where maybe my son will come into my office while I'm on a conference call. I haven't, like as an example today, I set expectations in my family that the office is closed from 2 to 3:30, and so far I haven't had any distractions, so I was able to circumvent any potential interruptions in that point. But communicating that, because hearing somebody yell at their children or their spouse on a conference call, which I have had happen before, feels incredibly awkward, right? And it makes me feel sheepish because I'm not that important for you to yell at your kid or your spouse that they just interrupted you while they were talking to me. So just be really, really mindful of that. Again, use visual aids to indicate when you're working. Put a sign up, mom's working, dad's working, quiet time on conference call. Go out and tell them. It's going to be new for them. Like, hey, you never told me this before, but now this is a different world. So
I heard someone share online that they have literal different hats that they put on, and John will laugh because I keep joking about making him hats. But so it's like, I'm in a meeting hat, or I'm working but could be interrupted hat, or I'm working, don't interrupt me hat. Especially for younger ones, there has to be something that's very obvious that you need that space, and maybe sometimes for spouses too.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great idea. Any sort of visual clue to make sure that people know that you're working. Also, I have a quiet place. It's actually, I shouldn't say this, it's in my daughter's bedroom, that if I have to have a confidential conversation that I can go to, there's a window there. If for some reason, I've got family, hanging out in my usual workspace, I can go to that individual kind of quiet spot and people know that's where it is. I did mention this a bit before. Please consider the triggers that you have that may set you off to potentially yell at one of your kids or raise your voice at someone who interrupts you, so that you understand when that happens that you're going to get frustrated. So being mindful of that and trying to get out of the way of it. Using EQ, our emotional intelligence probably will never be tested more, at least mine hasn't, in kind of my 25-year career than it has right now. So just being incredibly mindful of the stress, strain, and change we're under, and then obviously the impact of trying to do our jobs as best we can as we navigate through what's ahead. And then also be flexible with your work schedule. And what I mean by that is maybe you might have to take your son to a doctor's appointment or something that you need to do, or you might have something happen, a school assignment needs to be done by 2 o'clock and you forgot to do it, so it's 12 o'clock. please have the courage to communicate with your employer to say, hey, I'm not able to work from 12 to 2, but I'll make up that time from 9 to 11 or 10 to 10:30 or whatever the time frame might be, so that you can make up that lost time and being flexible in your work schedule. All right, and then as far as culture, as you as the employee, the best way for you to help and maintain this from your standpoint, and it may sound cliche-ish, but I recommend that you study your company cultures just to make sure that your employer is sticking to that as you navigate through the days, weeks ahead, and that we're staying consistent with that. Understand the keys to success. We mentioned this earlier in an employer section to help them understand. We recommended to assess your employees to make sure that they have the ability to work within a autonomous schedule, that they have the discipline to make sure to get the amount of work that they need to get done, that they can balance their schedule in a way to be able to do the laundry when they need to, or take the dogs for a walk, or run a quick errand to pick up mobile groceries or whatever the case might be. And then I also highly recommend that you batch your work so that you get small segments of success done, and not assume today I'm gonna do this giant project, so I'm gonna get it all done today. That's really not realistic. Let's pick it off in pieces and parts. I also recommend asking questions. So if you have a concern or something's not quite working the way to help an employee or your manager, or you're struggling, ask questions like, hey, why is Joe not available from like 10 to 4? I need Joe, to help me with this critical business aspect. Do you know what's going on? Or, hey, what happens if my Wi-Fi goes out? What's my next alternative for that? So don't be afraid to ask those questions. My main encouragement to you, in addition to not only asking the question, but potentially bringing a solution back to your manager that says, hey, I heard about these MiFis that are available. I saw one, they're only $10 a month. Is that something the company would consider reimbursing me for? So that you can consider that. So ask questions. And then in maintaining culture, this is what I found has happened in my firm, right? We celebrate, and we have a bunch of furry friends, furry family members that are within our teams, in our office space. So there's a commonality between the team members that have dogs, right? That they get each other's dogs, and they understand that, their nuances and when they bark. And we've had many times during conference calls where they'll bark, or one of our colleagues' cats likes to participate in our conference calls. So the cat will come walking into the picture. So just trying to find that common bond, so that, the next time you talk to that employee, it's like, hey, what's your cat's name again? And what prompts him or her to come sitting on you? And I used to have a cat when I was 16 years old, and it reminded me of what your cat looked like. So trying to create that common bond so that you can advance the culture of your company, because your culture is really about how your identity, the identity of what your business is, and then how your people within it should act. So creating relationships and camaraderie is terribly important. And to me, that's one of the biggest risks of this pandemic, is the distance socially for us. We've actually started something in our neighborhood, and I don't know if this would work for you, but every night at 7 o'clock, my wife starts a text chain and says, we're taking a walk. So we all go on a walk around our circle. We maintain safe distance. No. I had to have a conversation with one of the close talkers, like, hey, let's just maintain our safe distance. We're outside with good circulation, and it's a fun way to share kind of the news of the day and how everybody's feeling. And our dogs are great entertainment for us, is because they chase each other around, and they have more fun with it than we do. So making sure that you create those bonds with your staff members and your colleagues, it becomes a really important part.
In this, I've kind of said, like, I want to check in on one new coworker a day. Sometimes it's more on the interaction I'm having, but really sometimes that you do have to just be conscious and set a goal. It might seem weird, but when you are working from home, it can, you can just get in the momentum and forget that there's people sometimes outside of the work you're doing.
You got it. Thanks. Just a few more. Again, I'm actually in the process of scripting out some notes for a successful virtual work environment, potentially to draft for a white paper or a book. I also have another one on my mind. My third book, if I ever get to writing my first or second one, would be how do I blow up email? Not like physically like blow somebody up with an email, but like just eradicate it from the daily working life. Hundreds of emails, it's a great form of communication in the right place. We over rely on it. So I would definitely encourage you to be careful about it because it'll be easy to do in that form of isolation. And then also, as I mentioned about asking questions, also openly discuss issues you face with your manager and other team members. Hey, I know I was told not to feel bad about my dog barking, but I feel bad when my dog barks. Do you have a recommendation? I feel like I'm not being quite as productive at this as I thought I would. What are some things I can do differently? Have you created a schedule? So just face those issues head on. Try to strategize and think in your own mind, what could I do to address the issue, and then have collaboration. If you don't want to talk to your manager necessarily about it, maybe go to a colleague who may be feeling the exact same way and came up with a strategy to be able to address and circumvent the challenge that they were facing. All right, and as far as being managed from a distance, so here's the deal. First and foremost, that's okay, Bridge. First and foremost, we have to understand that this whole thing is new for everyone. I know we are at an advantage, Willery is, because we've been doing this since day one, and we have not seen any disruption other than encouraging and working with our clients that may not have had that same environment set up. This is new for your manager. This is new for you. He or she may not know how to do this perfectly well and are used to managing by walking around or by stopping into an office or by getting a group together in a physical boardroom. So just be understanding this is new, number one. Number two, leadership teams across the country and the world are incredibly strained and stressed right now, trying to navigate through protecting their business. Right? There's a lot of companies, if you think about it, many of the restaurants that are closed in Ohio right now and across the country are owned by small business owners. And they struggle at times to make payroll just when things are working well, let alone now when you have a across the board shutdown. So leadership team and owners are facing very unique times and are having to make very difficult decisions. So just as an employee, be incredibly mindful of that. The next item, once we get past just kind of the understanding of what's new and being cognizant of your manager and the leadership team, is that having clear expectations is paramount. So understanding what your manager expects of you differently or the same in a virtual environment is critical, because what will happen is if you set those expectations and then they're clearly documented, that's where I would use an email that says, hey, we had a conversation today. You talked to me about doing these 4 things, and this is where you want me to focus my time. You follow up with that, and then you stick to completing those 4 main tasks, or go above and beyond if you do so desire. And then let's just say, for example, you don't hit on the bottom 2. And your manager should hold you accountable to not hitting on those bottom 2 items on that list. So having a 2-way dialogue about clear expectations, to me, is paramount in working virtually. I also recommend, in order to create that cadence, is that you put a recurring touch base with your manager and your team on your calendar. So at least once a week in this immediate term, we should be getting our team together to collaborate, as well as then a one-on-one time to connect with your direct supervisor so that you can share about the day's events. And as things are ever changing within our business and within our country and across the world, we've got to be incredibly flexible and dynamic in our ability to make decisions and pivot as needed. You also have to run toward autonomy and self-initiative. Many companies have what I'll call traditional work settings for a reason. And as a result, they might end up having to have a workforce that really relies upon working in that environment. They need that structure. They need that self-forced discipline, so to speak. They need a manager to be walking around to make sure that they stay on task to get things done. Right now, you will not likely have some of that. So I would encourage you to run toward the autonomy. Go through a checklist of the things, like I said before: structured, discipline, the ability to work independently. Like if a few of those things don't fit for you as a natural tendency, then let's make sure that you self-evaluate that. And what do I need to do? To me, one of the key points is making that schedule, creating your to-do list, and batching your work. If we do those things, you can typically get a majority of the things that you're asked to do done. And then last but not least, I've been asked this question countless times, thankfully by loved ones, my wife, other colleagues and team members. How are you doing? And I ask that question of almost everyone that I speak with as we navigate through what this is today. And all I can tell you is I'm doing the best that I possibly can with the circumstances I'm in front of. I've never faced anything like this before. My Kent State education did not prepare me for this. I am trying to do the best that I can for the well-being of my firm and balancing that with the well-being of my staff. Sometimes that does not equate in a perfect scenario. It just doesn't. And that's the hard part about being in HR, about being in a leadership capacity. And so I would just ask you as an employee to do the best that you can and understand these are unique times, and this too shall pass. It's just that very unique state of the world that we just don't know exactly when. So, next slide, Bridget. I think that's it, right? There we go. All right, so just a brief reminder of the services that we provide. We're really devoted to HR technology, our human resource and payroll support, provide a number of unique business critical services and activities, as well as if you need any search support. We're seeing actually an influx in staff augmentation support, as there's a wide variety of reasons why some people can or cannot work. And then kind of ongoing support from a consultative standpoint of all things HCM, HR, and payroll.
Awesome. And we do have one large question that I kind of batched together so you guys can see so it's about managing productivity. So the first part is, how do you track hourly employees that are working from home? And then the reverse being, how do you show that you are adding value for 8 hours a day when you're working from home? So can you talk about tracking hourly employees first?
Sure. So if you are on a modern day technology for your HCM system or workforce management, I'm hopeful that that tool has if you're used to clocking in with a traditional time clock, they should have a virtual web timesheet for you to enter your time in and out on a daily basis, and then assimilating that on a weekly basis. Worst case scenario, you don't have that, then I would encourage your IT team to develop some form of an intranet site for them to allow you to enter time in that on an individual basis, so that you have to collect time and you have to memorialize that time. It's a necessary business environment requirement, and not only for getting people paid properly, but also for a regulatory perspective. Worst case scenario, you don't have either one of those. We can, again, go to paper timesheets. That would be a form that I would recommend that you create. Hopefully everybody would have a digital phone that they could take a scanned image of that and send it in, and then your payroll and HR department could assimilate those timesheets. That's going to take a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort, and add a unique nuance to this whole situation. But you got to get the time collection. You can also potentially based upon things that are in Teams or within Microsoft Office 365. You can do timestamps through when you log on your computer and log out. I also know that the cell phone companies provide a same data collection tool that you can turn on pretty immediately to log time in and out. It's usually designed for people that are traveling from one site location to the other, but if in a short-term fix, I know those can be turned on pretty quickly. So that's on the time side. Bridget, you asked these two-fold questions, and I forget the second one, so I apologize.
No problem. And then the other is, how do you show that you are adding value in those 8 hours a day as an employee?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've done with a few members of my staff is twofold. Number one, if you have those dashboard kind of AI-based tools and you're entering information about what you accomplished, your leadership team should be able to see those on an individual level that trees up to a department level, it trees up to a company level. So if you don't have those in existence today, and again, I said don't rely upon email, but you can send a reminder recap email to your manager on I wouldn't do it every day because that feels a little bit overreached. I'd recommend it on an every other day basis. I just want to let you know over the last 24 hours, I was able to get this particular project 80% complete. I was able to do, get this customer's accounts payable down to, owing us $2,000, and kind of the list goes on. You can also use automated tools like Smartsheet to create those task lists and just kind of show progress on the things that you're getting done over a course of the days, the weeks, the months that we are facing ahead.
Yes, and I agree with John. And sometimes it's also just, again, goes back to those clear expectations. If your manager has set them, or if you've set them with your manager, you all know where you stand. And so it's less about proving value, and it's just a bit more innate. And that is everything. So if you guys do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to John or myself with those. And I know we had some that I wanted to get back to people after the webinar, so I will make sure to do that. So thank you everyone for attending. Any last words, John?
Thank you all for taking the time. I know I hope you found it to be helpful. If there was a particular topic that you want more insight on, please again reach out to me or Bridget. And I encourage everyone to be safe and to create that appropriate social distance and be critically mindful of the recommendations that have been made by the CDC. And my last sign off on is that we will get through this together. We will look back on this as a very unique time in the history of our country and the world. And even though it feels really, really bad in spots at times right now, we will be better off for it. It is certainly something that's unique, but we will make the most out of what we're facing and get through it together.
All right, thank you everyone. Have a safe rest of your day. And again, if there's anything you need, just reach out to us. Bye.